With the recent Peacemaker finale, it seems like James Gunn unveiled a major part of his plan for the DCU. Christopher Smith was left stranded on Salvation, a prison planet that serves as the backdrop of the famous 2007 DC Comics event, Salvation Run. Today, we're going to be going through the whole story. By the end, you'll know everything you need to know and be free to speculate how Salvation may play into Man of Tomorrow or Lanterns. Really quickly, I want to ask you to consider subscribing. It helps me out more than you know. Without further ado, this is Salvation Run, Issue 1. In the heart of a government building where the lights never went out, Amanda Waller sat behind her desk like a general before a battlefield. The air in her office was stale and electric, humming with the low vibration of a dozen secure data lines. Across from her stood Rick Flag, Jr., the soldier who had seen too much and still believed that pragmatism was the highest form of mercy. Between them lay the file. Its label was simple, bureaucratic, chilling, off-world relocation initiative. They spoke in the kind of calm that only came from conviction. There was no moral hesitation between them, no shared unease at the scope of what they were deciding. Supervillains, they agreed, were a problem without end, incarcerated, rehabilitated, and unleashed in a cycle that mocked justice. So, the plan was simple, final, permanent. Dump them on a planet somewhere in deep space, far enough away that no rescue, no redemption could ever reach them. Then forget them. The words hung there like a verdict. There were ethical concerns, of course, but neither Waller nor Flag were the type to lose sleep over ethics. The plan would go ahead. 2 weeks later, on the other side of the stars, the rogues of Keystone City trudged across the endless surface of a world that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. Captain Cold, Weather Wizard, Heatwave, Mirror Master, and Abracadabra, once masters of chaos and cunning, were now little more than survivors. The ground beneath their boots was black and spined with metallic growths, the horizon alive with the movements of things that weren't quite machines and weren't quite animals. They called it Prison World. The air was thin and sharp, tasting faintly of oil and rust. The sky was an ugly bruise, streaked with lightning that never struck the same place twice. The biomechanical horrors that hunted them were relentless, chittering, crawling, learning. But somehow, they still moved forward. It was Abracadabra's intellect, centuries beyond theirs, that gave them their first glimmer of hope. He had managed to communicate with the planet's native pygmies, diminutive, wary creatures who spoke in a broken patchwork of language and sound. Through them, the rogues had heard a rumor. Somewhere out there was a place untouched by the biomechs, a district miles wide where the monsters had been wiped out. They called it the safe zone. They knew they'd never make it. That truth became undeniable when, during the next attack, Abracadabra screamed and went down hard. The bones in his arm broke with a sound that echoed through the barren valley. That night they made camp under the fractured ribs of a rusted structure that might once have been alive. The fire they built burned green and hissed like acid. None of them slept. Captain Cold stared into the flames, his jaw clenched around words he refused to say. Weather Wizard muttered to himself, turning his broken wand over in his hands. Heatwave watched the horizon, waiting for the next set of glowing eyes to appear. They remembered what Rick Flag had told them before they were sent through the boom tube, that the governments of Earth had reached the end of their patience, that this was mercy of a kind. Every prison on Earth had failed, every wall had fallen, and now the same arrogance that had driven them to conquer the world had delivered them their own kingdom of dust and metal. Checkmate had called it humane. They told the prisoners that the world was safe, full of resources and tools to help them rebuild. There had been no malice, only exhaustion, a collective sigh of relief as humanity washed its hands of them. The rogues knew better now. The only thing this world offered was a slower death. The first explosion came just before dawn. The shockwave rolled through the canyons, scattering the embers of their fire. In the distance, something bright had torn through the sky. A fresh boom tube opening, another batch of the damned arriving to share their exile. When the sun bled up over the horizon, the rogues went to meet them. They found a crowd of familiar faces. Killers, thieves, madmen, all still clinging to their arrogance. Some laughed, others demanded answers. The Joker, eyes glinting in the alien light, refused to believe a word of what they said. Then the ground broke open. From beneath, a burrowing monster erupted, a biomech the size of a city bus, all claws and cables. It seized Girder and began to drag him down. The rogues moved without thinking, unleashing everything they had left. When the smoke cleared, the creature was gone, and Girder still breathed. Even the Joker was quiet for a moment. The truth couldn't be denied. This wasn't a prison world. It was a graveyard. They argued anyway, furious at the betrayal, raging that Checkmate had lied to them. But high above, unseen, two shapes watched from the shadows of the cliffs. Two beings not of this world. Their voices were calm as they observed the chaos below. Checkmate had not lied, they said. When the planet was first surveyed, it had appeared harmless, stable, perfect. Something had changed since then, and as they watched the criminals wander deeper into the metallic wasteland, one of them whispered the final warning. The sentences here would be lifelong. And though life itself might not last long, the punishment would. Salvation Run, Issue 2. The villains called it Salvation. The word tasted like a joke, bitter and sharp in their mouths. The planet was raw metal and burning wind, a world that roared instead of breathed. Even the ground beneath them seemed alive, pulsing faintly with heat, as though the entire world resented their presence. They were not supposed to be here, and the planet never let them forget it. Metallo's eyes glowed dimly in the dusk as he led the hunting party across the ridges. Tar Pit trudged beside him, thick and steaming in the cold air. Behind them came Mean Streak, Iron Cross, Hellhound, Scorpio, Ragdoll, Manticore, and the Body Doubles, 9 killers against the unknown. They had come to fight the native machine creatures that roamed the wastelands, towering biomechanical beasts whose movements were all whirring joints and shrieking blades. When the attack came, it was fast and final. The air split with a metallic screech, and Hellhound went down, clutching at the deep gash across his chest where a tail blade had sliced him open. He tried to rise, snarling, but blood poured between his fingers in thick black streams. The others circled around him for a moment, wordless, assessing the wound. Then someone said what they were all thinking, that it was hopeless, that they should leave him. But the Body Doubles protested. They insisted that they could save him, that he was too valuable to abandon. Reluctantly, the others lifted Hellhound's limp body onto Metallo's rocket scooter and began the long, silent march back toward camp. The truth came later. When they stumbled into a hunting pack of 4 lion lizards, massive reptilian predators whose metal jaws clicked like gunfire, the Body Doubles acted first. Without hesitation, they shoved the delirious Hellhound off the scooter and into the beast's path. The creatures tore into him instantly, and while he screamed, the rest of the group ran. The Body Doubles didn't look back. They'd gotten exactly what they wanted. The camp on Salvation was a patchwork of firelight and paranoia, a community of monsters learning how to live among one another. At the edge of the flames, Kid Carnival found the Joker sitting alone, his grin catching the light like broken glass. The boy said he'd always looked up to him, that he planned to honor him by surpassing him, by killing him the moment he dropped his guard. The Joker only laughed. Later, Simon stood before the gathered crowd, his head gleaming in the dim light, his voice carrying through the alien air. He declared that he had discovered a way for them to survive, not just as scattered survivors, but as a society that would last generations. He spoke of order, of structure, of rebuilding. But his vision was twisted. He told them that the women would serve as baby factories and that they must abandon any hope of escape. Salvation would be their world now. For a moment, silence, then shouting. Rage. The women screamed at him, and others joined them until the camp was a sea of hatred and disbelief. And then, through the noise, the Joker stepped forward. Without a word, he bent down, picked up a rock, and brought it down on Simon's head. The sound was wet and immediate. The body fell. The crowd went silent again. No one challenged the Joker after that. Back on Earth, in the halls of Belle Reve, the Suicide Squad prepared for another departure. "The final group for now," someone said. Lex Luthor, Catwoman, Blockbuster 3, Chemo. Each prisoner was fitted with a restraint collar and marched toward the waiting boom tube, a shimmering gate that hummed with energy and exile. When Rick Flag closed the door, two names were still inside: Deadshot and Bane. Deadshot's voice crackled through the comms, furious. He demanded answers, but Flag's tone was unflinching. They were being dismissed from the Suicide Squad. Their service was over. Their destination was salvation. Deadshot shouted that he'd kill him for this. Flag told him that threats like that were exactly why he couldn't stay on Earth. Deadshot promised he would come back and make good on it. Then the boom tube flared, and they were gone. When the light faded on Salvation, the new arrivals found themselves standing amid a sea of the damned. Luthor stood at the center of them, calm, immaculate, commanding attention the way gravity commands planets. The mob quieted. He began to speak. He spoke of truth, justice, the American way. He told them that if they wanted to leave this hell, they would have to build their own salvation. They would have to construct a new boom tube, return to Earth, and destroy those who had sent them here. At first, the crowd jeered, mocking his confidence. But Luthor kept speaking, his voice sharp and certain. And slowly, the jeers turned to murmurs, the murmurs to cheers. By the time he finished, the wasteland was echoing with their roars. Salvation had found its new ruler. Salvation Run, Issue 3. The camp was already breaking before the first stone was thrown. On the barren world, the villains called salvation. Chaos was the natural language. The uneasy alliances that had formed in the first days were fraying fast, and there were few left who bothered to play the part of mediator. The strongest shouted the loudest, the cunning plotted in whispers, and the rest simply tried to survive. Lex Luthor stood at the center of the gathering, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. He spoke not as a man among criminals, but as a leader addressing his subordinates. With Dr. Sivana, Professor Evo, and General Immortus at his side, he announced that they had found a way off the rock. A plan. A promise. The words hung in the hot, metallic air like salvation itself. Before he could finish, laughter broke through the crowd. The Joker. He rose from the back of the mob, his voice shrill with delight and contempt. He called out Luthor for presuming to lead them, mocking him for expecting obedience when he hadn't even shared the plan. He asked why any of them should accept authority here when they had refused it on Earth. The question hit a nerve, and the murmuring crowd began to stir. The air tightened. Then the ground moved. A deep rumble, a tearing sound beneath their feet, and the camp exploded upward in a geyser of dirt and steel. From the pit came a thing that should not have existed, something like a kraken, but forged from earth and machinery. It tore through tents and scavenged gear with claws like excavator blades. Panic swept the camp. Amid the screams, Joker and Gorilla Grodd moved together, their madness aligned for once. They lured the creature toward Chemo, the living chemical bomb, and with a spark of twisted brilliance, used him to annihilate the monster. The blast threw fire and acid into the air, and when the dust settled, Joker stood amid the wreckage, grinning. He called himself a humble hero of the people. Then he turned on Luthor again, his voice rising over the wind, accusing him of arrogance and aristocracy. The crowd roared back, half cheering, half cursing. The fragile structure of their camp disintegrated in seconds. It began with shouts and ended with murder. The fight broke out between those who worked and those who watched, between those who believed in Luthor's order and those who wanted none at all. Lines blurred, allegiances shifted, and in the chaos, Iron Cross stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the Joker. He called the clown a danger to them all. Joker answered by putting a bullet through his skull. The sound cracked across the camp, final and absolute. For a moment, the mob went silent. Then Joker announced that he and Grodd were staging a mutiny. All hell followed. The camp became a war zone, villains tearing into one another, flames rising from what little shelter they had built. The fight spread fast, a tide of violence consuming everything. Those loyal to Luthor fought to maintain control. Those loyal to Joker fought for the thrill of rebellion, and those caught between simply tried to stay alive. When the smoke began to choke even him, Grodd stepped forward. His mind reached outward, vast and suffocating. With a thought, he forced calm into the crowd. The violence stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only exhaustion and smoke. He and the Joker turned their backs on the ruin they had made. Together, they walked away from the camp, leading those who would follow. A sizable fraction of the population, madmen, killers, zealots, fell in behind them, leaving the rest to rebuild what remained. In the aftermath, Sivana cornered Luthor among the wreckage. His voice was shrill, furious, demanding to know what good had come from this disaster. Luthor was calm, as always. He told Sivana that he had expected the mutiny. He had, in fact, arranged it. Iron Cross's confrontation with the Joker had been by design. The chaos, the split, it was all part of his plan. In Luthor's eyes, it had been an overwhelming success. He had purged the camp of the worthless, those who would waste resources and weaken resolve. And he had created something else, a common enemy, a figure for his remaining followers to unite against. The rebellion, he said, would give purpose to those who stayed. Sivana stared at him, speechless. Luthor simply looked out over the wreckage, calculating the next move. Not everyone stayed. Far from the rebuilt camp, Blockbuster 3 walked alone into the forest, his enormous form dissolving into green light and flame. When it faded, John Johns, the Martian Manhunter, stood in his place. He took out a communicator, its faint glow the only light in the clearing. Speaking quietly to an unseen presence, he reported what he had witnessed: the division, the deaths, the fragile new order forming in the ashes. He did not say who he was reporting to. The signal faded, and the forest swallowed him back into its silence. Catwoman moved like a shadow between the trees, her body low and silent, her eyes fixed on the figure ahead. The forest of salvation was quiet except for the metallic wind, whispering through the twisted branches. She had been following him for hours, ever since he'd left the ruins of Luthor's camp alone. Martian Manhunter stood in a clearing bathed in pale alien light, his form shifting in and out of visibility as though his very body couldn't decide what it wanted to be. He spoke softly into a communicator, the glow reflecting faintly off his green skin. His voice was low, patient, deliberate. He was speaking to Batman, or at least he hoped he was. John didn't know if the Dark Knight could even hear him across the endless void between Salvation and Earth. But still, he reported. About Luthor, about Joker, about the divisions spreading like cracks through the fractured society of exiles. The words left his mouth like confessions, fading into static. High above him, perched in the crook of a twisted tree, Catwoman listened, her expression unreadable. In Luthor's camp, the illusion of order was breaking again. Lex had built himself a throne out of logic and control, but every day it splintered a little more under the weight of desperation. Now he was forced to mediate between two factions, the body doubles on one side and Bane and Deadshot on the other. The distrust ran deep. The camp still remembered that Deadshot and Bane had been part of the Salvation deportation, the very machinery that had sent them all here. Some wanted them dead, others wanted them exiled. Luthor raised a hand, silencing the argument with a single motion. His solution was pure pragmatism, pure Lex. He would hire them both. He told the camp that Bane and Deadshot would now serve as his personal security detail, men he trusted with his life. He offered them $1 million each when they made it back to Earth. The numbers, even meaningless here, carried power. For a moment, the tension eased. For a moment, the order held. Joker's camp was another story entirely. Where Luthor ruled through intellect and structure, Joker ruled through chaos. His followers were restless, starving, and afraid. Their leader spent his days wandering among them, laughing at their suffering, calling it character building. The cracks in his empire of madness were widening. When Bolt finally snapped, it was inevitable. He lunged at Joker, rage and hunger driving him forward. But before the fight could spiral, Kid Carnival intervened, vicious and efficient, cutting down the rebellion before it began. The camp returned to its uneasy silence, the tension thicker than the air. It was then that Bane and Monsieur Mallah arrived, traveling through the wasteland like ghosts of a forgotten age. Their arrival turned heads, but it was Malah's approach to Grodd that changed everything. Away from the others, the two gorillas faced each other among the jagged stones. Mallah spoke first. He called for unity, appealing to their shared blood and brilliance. As fellow gorillas, natural kings of the jungle, he said, they could rule this forsaken world together. With their combined might, they could crush Luthor, destroy Joker, and take everything. Grodd laughed. It was not a kind sound. He mocked Mallah, sneering at him as an absurd science experiment, daring to compare himself to a proud child of Gorilla City. The insult hit like a blow. Malah's hand trembled as he raised his weapon, calling Grodd a beast. The shot rang out, echoing through the valley. Grodd didn't fall. He barely flinched. His eyes burned with feral rage as he charged. Bullets tore into his flesh, but they slowed him only slightly. He seized Mallah by the throat, lifting him into the air. From behind, Bane shouted, begging for mercy. Grodd turned, snarling, and in one motion snatched Bane from his perch. He swung the mechanical dome like a hammer, smashing it into Mallah again and again. The metal cracked. The shell split. Mallah fell, blood mixing with oil. As his life drained away, Mallah smiled faintly. With his final breath, he whispered that he died happy, because now, at last, he and Bane would be together forever. Grodd dropped what was left of them both and stood in silence for a long time. Then the Joker appeared. He admired Grodd's work, calling it beautiful in its brutality. He said he respected him, then pushed him. The gorilla stumbled backward, teetered on the edge of the cliff, and fell. His body crashed into the rocks far below, disappearing into the abyss. Joker wiped his hands and smiled. He told no one in particular that he hated sharing. Far across the planet, 5 figures trekked through the wilderness. Vandal Savage led the way, the eternal survivor moving with a sense of purpose that seemed almost divine. Behind him followed Lady Flash, Nocturna, Cheetah, and Phobia, each silent, each watching him closely. The terrain around them was jagged and dead, yet Savage's voice was calm as he spoke. He told them why Luthor's camp would fail. Too rigid, too dependent on control. He told them why Joker's would collapse. Too chaotic, too self-destructive. Both leaders were prisoners of their own design. They crested a hill, and the landscape changed. Below them spread a valley bathed in light. Lush, vibrant, impossibly alive. Flowers bloomed in colors unseen on Earth. Rivers shimmered like molten glass. The air seemed to hum with peace. Vandal Savage stopped at the edge, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He told them they had reached the rumored safe zone, the paradise at the end of damnation. Salvation Run. Issue 5. The night was alive with fire. Joker's camp moved like a swarm of insects through the darkness, torches flickering against the jagged skyline of Salvation. The air was dry and electric, carrying the metallic tang of blood and dust. He led from the front, his grin wide, his laughter echoing low through the still air. They were heading for Camp Luthor. It wasn't strategy, it was appetite. Joker wanted supplies, weapons, food. He wanted to see the look in Lex Luthor's eyes when the balance of control slipped. Under the veil of night, they struck, silent at first, then loud, chaos erupting like a sickness across the camp. Within minutes, the raid turned personal. Joker found Luthor standing in the center of his camp, calm amid the gunfire. The clown raised his weapon and pointed it directly at the man he hated most, order itself. But before he could pull the trigger, another sound cut through the din, the click of a gun being drawn. Deadshot. He had his sights on Joker's skull, the laser a bright red dot resting between painted eyes. For a moment, the entire battlefield froze. Every gun lowered, every breath held. Far away, under a sky that shimmered faintly green, the safe zone glowed like an illusion. The air was warm and fragrant, the ground soft with living grass. Lady Flash ran her hands through it as if to convince herself it was real. For the first time since she'd arrived on this cursed world, She allowed herself to believe in hope. Vandal Savage stood beside her, eternal and unreadable. He had told them this place would be different, that here they would build something better. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something else. He explained his vision in that calm, immortal tone, the vision of a new civilization born from ruin, a world populated by strength and legacy. And for that, he said, he would need them, the women, as breeding stock. The realization struck her like a blow. The paradise around her turned hollow, the scent of flowers suddenly rotten. Vandal Savage smiled, already imagining his future kingdom. Back at Camp Luthor, the chaos had fallen into an eerie silence. The fires still burned, but the gunfire had ceased. The world hung on the fragile tension between two men, Lex Luthor and the Joker. Each held the other's life in his hands. Luthor's voice was steady, calculating. He reasoned with the clown that his army was outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Joker's reply was quick, almost amused. He agreed. Luthor couldn't be killed. Not yet. He said that Luthor still represented something useful, the only real chance any of them had to escape the planet. But even so, he demanded the camp's supplies, claiming them as the spoils of his chaos. The standoff stretched on, the flames painting both their faces in shades of red and gold. Around them, every soldier, every villain, waited for the first shot. In the trees beyond the camp, another drama unfolded. Catwoman, sleek and silent, had been watching the entire exchange. But her stealth had not gone unnoticed. Someone spotted her shape against the glow of the fires, and a shout went up. Accusations flew. A spy, a traitor, a good guy. To save herself, Catwoman struck first with words sharper than claws. She turned the suspicion away by exposing what she had seen. Blockbuster was not what he seemed. She had watched him change in the forest, seen his form shift, green and fluid. She told them who he truly was, Martian Manhunter. The revelation hit the crowd like a spark in dry tinder. The camp turned on him instantly, ignoring his calm assurances, his promises of help. The villains saw only a deceiver, a hero in disguise, and they brought him down. Even as he pleaded for reason, they overwhelmed him, their fury drowning out his words. And far above it all, watching through a haze of red smoke and shadow, another figure smiled. Darkseid. From his vantage point beyond the atmosphere, his eyes gleamed with cruel fascination. Salvation was not a prison. It was a crucible, a proving ground. Every creature that stalked its surface, every biomechanical horror, had been his design. He had created this world for one purpose: to forge a new legion of parademons through the most savage trial imaginable. And now, with the villains tearing each other apart, that trial was about to reach its climax. Darkseid's hand moved over a console of alien fire. With a single gesture, he unleashed them. The sky split open. From the heavens poured a horde, vast, endless, shrieking. Wings of metal, eyes of burning light. The parademons had come to salvation, and the world of the damned was about to burn again. Salvation Run, Issue 6. The air in Luthor's camp had curdled into suspicion. The flames that burned through the night cast long, twitching shadows over the faces of men and monsters, each one waiting for the other to move first. At the center of it all lay the Martian Manhunter, chained and silent, his green skin dim beneath the flickering light. The villains argued about what to do with him. Some demanded his execution, others his interrogation. But no one could agree on anything except their mutual hatred. Then came the next betrayal. Thunder and lightning, once heroes, now captives of circumstance, had crept into the camp under cover of darkness. Their intention was clear: to free the Martian. Whether they had been falsely imprisoned or simply disillusioned, no one knew. They didn't get far. Bane caught them in the act, his massive hand closing around one of their throats before they could even cry out. Within moments, they too were prisoners, bound beside the Martian they had come to rescue. The camp was a boiling pot now, and Luthor stood at its edge, trying to keep it from spilling over. But the real fire came from outside the cells. The Joker. He had been watching from the start, painted grin twisting with delight at the tension in the air. When he finally began to speak, it was with the cruel rhythm of mockery, each word a jab, each joke a spark. He mocked Luthor's leadership, his obsession with control, his inability to inspire anything but fear. Luthor, usually unflappable, snapped back. His voice rose, his composure cracked, and he tore into the clown with venom and contempt. The argument burned hotter until Luthor leaned in too close, his words cutting too deep. The Joker's response was instantaneous. He backhanded Luthor across the face. The sound echoed through the camp like a gunshot. Far away, beneath a sky bruised by alien light, Vandal Savage's utopia was beginning to fracture. His camp, lush and deceptively serene, had been meant to be the foundation of a new world, his world. Around him, 4 women walked: Lady Flash, Nocturna, Cheetah, and Phobia. He had promised each of them a throne, a crown, a future. Each believed herself to be his chosen queen. But the truth was a mirror with too many reflections. The women had begun to sense it, the overlapping promises, the half-truths hidden behind Savage's immortal smile. The cracks in his deception widened with every word he spoke. He played them against one another with practiced ease, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that their patience was wearing thin. The paradise he had built was beginning to rot from within. Back in the main camp, the storm finally broke. Luthor and the Joker faced each other in the dirt, their followers forming a rough circle around them. No words now, no debate, no philosophy. Just 2 men who refused to yield. The first blow came from Luthor, a precise, deliberate strike. Joker laughed and swung back, wild and gleeful. The fight was long, ugly, and exhausting. Luthor's strength was in control, in measured calculation. Joker's was in chaos. Every punch Luthor landed only seemed to fuel the clown's energy. Blood ran down their faces, dust clung to their clothes, and the circle of onlookers tightened as if watching gods tear each other apart. By the time it was done, Luthor had landed more hits, had, by every rational measure, won. But reason didn't apply to the Joker. His body was a map of pain, his mind a furnace of madness. He refused to fall. And finally, with a sickening grin, he struck the last blow. Luthor collapsed, gasping, the Joker swaying above him, bloodied but triumphant. No one saw what was happening beyond the fight until it was too late. While every guard, every fighter, every eye had been fixed on the duel, the horizon had begun to change. The first sign was the flicker of red light in the distance. Then the sound, low and metallic, like the grinding of machinery across the sky. The robot sentinels of the planet, the biomechanical horrors that had once been thought scattered, were returning. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, rising from the pits and canyons, their eyes glowing with mechanical fury. And then the sky itself split open. A boom tube flared above them, vast and terrible, bathing the camp in crimson light. Through it poured an army, winged silhouettes blotting out the stars, screaming in unison. The parademons of apocalypse had come. As their shadows fell over the camp, the victors of the fight, the broken men still struggling to breathe, looked up to find that their war for dominance no longer mattered. The true war had just begun. Salvation Run, Issue 7. The sky was a furnace. The parademons fell like a storm through the air, their wings slicing the smoke, their shrieks ripping through the chaos. Luthor's camp had become a battlefield lit by fire and panic. Brutal screamed once, just once, before a parademon spear impaled him clean through. The others swarmed, the air thick with their metallic reek and the sound of tearing flesh. But the villains of Earth were nothing if not stubborn. Through sheer rage and instinct, they fought back. Bane's fists shattered armor. Deadshot's guns barked fire into the swarm. Even the Joker laughed through the blood and madness, carving through wings with a broken blade. One by one, the parademons fell, and for a brief moment, the camp was still. Luthor stood in the center of the ruin, his face streaked with ash and triumph. "This," he said, his voice low, "was only the first wave." He was right. The ground split open beneath them before the words had finished leaving his lips. From below came the churning roar of something ancient, something alive. The planet itself seemed to rise against them. Its biomechanical creatures, the same horrors that had stalked them since their arrival, erupting from the dirt and tearing into the camp. The villains scattered, firing, shouting, dying. Then the impossible happened. The parademons returned. This time, they did not attack the villains. They attacked the creatures. The sky and ground became a maelstrom of violence as the two armies collided, metal against metal, wing against claw. The villains froze where they stood, watching as their enemies ignored them completely. The creatures of salvation focused only on their new adversaries. Luthor's eyes narrowed. He saw the pattern, the rhythm, the purpose. He understood. The planet itself was a test, a proving ground for Darkseid's parademons. The biomechanical beasts were not predators. They were training weapons. The world was a crucible, forged to harden apocalypse soldiers through endless war. Luthor turned from the chaos, his mind already moving ahead. "We're leaving," he said. "Now, move everything. The boom tube device goes with us." But where? There was no safety here. From behind him, Catwoman's voice cut through the din. She spoke of Vandal Savage's camp, the safe zone. It was the only place left that hadn't yet fallen to fire. Luthor nodded once. The order was given. The villains gathered what they could and moved into the wasteland, the boom tube core glimmering like a dying sun between them. At the safe zone, Vandal Savage stood on a ridge, watching the distant fires. Even from miles away, he could see the smoke rising from Luthor's camp like a funeral pyre. He had built this place to last, to stand above the chaos. And yet, even paradise trembled when the gods of apocalypse moved. His followers approached from behind. The women, Lady Flash, Nocturna, Cheetah, and Phobia, had come together at last, their eyes sharp with betrayal. They had seen through him. They knew he had pitted them against one another, promising each a crown, each a throne. Vandal only smiled. He told them he was pleased they had found a common cause, that this was exactly what he wanted, for unity, even if born from deception. It was all part of his plan for his new civilization. They didn't see the genius in it. They saw only his arrogance. Their fury boiled over, and they attacked. But before their blows could land, light split the air. Warp's teleportation tore through the camp, and from it stepped Luthor and his army of survivors. The villains of two camps faced one another, chaos meeting calculation. Luthor raised his hand and spoke quickly. They didn't have time for war. The planet was falling apart. He offered Savage a deal, help finish the teleportation device, and they could all return to Earth. Savage hesitated, but the logic was irrefutable. The parademons were coming. The world was dying. Survival outweighed pride. Then the ground shook again. Gorilla Grodd emerged from the tree line, bloodied but alive, the impossible survivor of the abyss Joker had thrown him into. Without a word, he lunged for the clown, eyes red with vengeance. He would have killed him then and there, but the sky cracked open again. Another patrol of parademons screaming down through the clouds. The two monsters stopped mid-fight. The army descended. General Immortus was the first to die, torn apart by their claws. Solomon Grundy followed, roaring defiance until he was ripped into silence. The villains turned their fury outward once more, fighting side by side, and somehow they prevailed. When the last parademon fell smoking to the ground, Luthor turned to the machine. The boom tube was ready. They would go home. The light began to build, a blinding pulse rising from the device. One by one, the villains stepped through. Savage, Joker, Bane, Deadshot, Catwoman. They disappeared into the glow. Luthor waited until the end. Always the last. Always in control. Only then did the truth come out. The machine's power came from those trapped inside it. Heatmonger, Thunder, Lightning, Plasmus, Neutron, and Warp. Their bodies were the core, their energy the fuel. They were still alive, barely. Thunder looked up at him, her voice raw with disbelief. She called him a monster. Luthor's face hardened. His voice was cold. He said he had done what was necessary, that he had saved everyone. It was the so-called heroes who had condemned them all to this hell in the first place. As he stepped into the light, he looked back at the burning sky and shouted to the heavens, "I win! Do you hear me? I beat you! All of you!" The boom tube flared, swallowing him whole. Then the machine exploded. The blast tore through the safe zone, vaporizing the remaining parademons and igniting the forest beyond. The shockwave flattened what was left of the camps. When the dust settled, only silence remained. Captain Cold's voice broke it, a quiet reflection carried on the wind. He spoke of what it meant to be them, to live as the world's monsters. Call us bad guys, call us villains, call us whatever you like, though I prefer anti-heroes myself. We may not be the ones you want marrying your daughter, but we have this to say for ourselves. When everything goes to hell, we're the ones, maybe the only ones, that are certain to survive. Why, you ask? Because unlike the good guys, we're willing to do whatever it takes to survive. Honestly, I'd love nothing more than to put the whole thing out of my mind. Those weeks we spent trapped on that miserable hellhole of a planet. But it keeps coming back to me. The death and the tension and the waiting. So I let those thoughts run their course and I experience it all over again for a few minutes like it's still happening. And then I get on with my life. Those in my profession don't get a lot of time for reflection. We're always moving forward. Always on to the next thing. We have to. It's what we know. We do what we have to do. We fight. And we survive. As his words faded, the view widened. The camera of the mind pulled back over the scorched planet, the dead safe zone, the burning ruins of Luthor's camp, the endless smoke curling into the blood-red sky. And deep within the wreckage, still bound in his cell, the Martian Manhunter stared into the flames. Salvation was finished, but the fire still burned. That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed our journey through Salvation Run. Now that we've covered the series, what parts do you hope get incorporated into the DCU? What parts do you hope they leave behind? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me out. Until next time, this is Geek Inc. signing off.